there are a lot of changes happening. As I said, changes in the data, changes in the regulatory guidelines, changes in how are we submitting the data, how are we looking at the data, changes in how fast do we come up with a drug.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Verisian Community Podcast. I'm delighted to have a wonderful guest joining us today, Ritika from Novartis. I think you're calling in from Hyderabad, right?
Correct, yeah.
But you're usually based out of Noida, or how does that work?
So yeah, I'm based out of Delhi, which is Noida is close to Delhi. But I'm here in Hyderabad because I work here at Novartis. So I'm visiting office right now.
Excellent. So, so Ritika is joining us, and her background is um, fairly relatively new as a statistical programmer in the field, but she's been extremely active within the community. I think last year you presented at the Fuse EU Connect, I think it was, and
Yes.
and Ritika has a great interest in professional development, which is something we want to talk about today, which I think it's incredibly important for new and even programmers that have been around for a while, because well there's so many different new technologies, let alone generative AI, from open source to R coming up, that I think even senior programmers who've been around would quite benefit from at least the thinking about how to look at new technology. And Ritika has a great paper that she submitted also for the conference. I don't think the talk is online, but definitely check out the paper that Ritika published online. I think you also have a blog post that you published on the Fuse website. So
Yeah.
definitely check that out. One of the things that will be particularly interesting, I think, for the listeners to hear about is what Ritika calls the new normal. So with that, why did you choose to go into the field of statistical programming? And now that you're sort of fairly established, how does it compare to your initial impressions when you started out the role?
I basically have a background of bioinformatics and biotechnology. And in my master's, I learned about both the translational part of the research, as in core research, biology research, and also the computational part of the whole process. So, a lot of bioinformatics. Over there, I learned a lot of programming, different languages like C, Python, R, C. So, I got interested in data analytics during the tenure of my master's. And about joining statistical programming, I would say that was um, something that happened by chance because I got placed at Novartis out of my campus, and that's when I joined the group. Now, coming to how I ended up here and why have I still stayed, is because I feel as a statistical programmer, even though this is a very computational job and there is no direct relationship to a drug, uh, production of a particular drug, but I feel that you're still a part of a big chain that lets a patient receive a drug in time, which is required and which helps them have a better life or lead a better life or maybe get a cure for something that makes their life better. So that gives me a lot of satisfaction along with um, something that I really like doing, which is programming and also being involved in decisions that are leading to something that really makes an impact in the world. So I would say that has always motivated me to stay, and I think will always motivate me to stay in this field in the coming future.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating, the work of clinical programmers, because the in a way, and this is definitely my personal opinion, but one of the things that I find, especially when you look at the rest of the value chain, especially sort of early research, the attention is always on, like, let's find the best molecule available, and somehow that's magically going to solve or get to a blockbuster drug at the end. But the rigor required to actually ensure that, well, the data generated from trials is correctly interpreted is fascinatingly complex, and then communicating that to, well, firstly obviously internal stakeholders, but then obviously the regulator, is surprisingly more complex than outsiders tend to understand.
That's correct. Yeah. So I believe, as you mentioned, this would be a link between the research that's happening to get a molecule uh, to cure a particular disease and the final step wherein you get authentication for this molecule. So if this weren't present in the whole chain, then I mean, of course, that would be difficult. And data in today's world and in the fourth industrial revolution. So my paper was also about that. That happened. That was submitted for Fuse last year, Fuse EU Connect. So in the fourth industrial revolution, which we are going through right now, and the upcoming revolutions that will happen, data is the key to the entire industry. So how do we collect data, how do we analyze data, how do we visualize data, and then finally how do we interpret data in order to do anything in the industry is
Mm.
definitely key to any business or even any innovation.
So, zooming in a little bit onto um, the work of the day-to-day job of a statistical programmer, obviously generative AI is the whole rage, where people that, well, let's just say people that otherwise would never have experienced AI suddenly are, thrust into this promise of general artificial intelligence. But there's just so many new challenges, especially within the field, from open source to R to other languages. We've spoken about Python. You've mentioned Julia before. Different data management platforms. How do you culturally within organizations where you have such established processes, SOPs, how can an organization embrace these technologies? Because obviously they're massive opportunities, but what are your thoughts in terms of in terms of enabling the right culture to adopt these technologies, on besides just the day-to-day of, well, submission deliverables from CTM to Adam? What are your thoughts?
I would say, first of all, that's a big, big task and a big hurdle in the day to day work that we do, right? Because there is change starting from how we collect the data. AI actually comes very late in the picture, but there's a big change in how we have started to collect the data, and then how do we analyze the data. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the platforms are changing. And then within these platforms, then comes the AI. I mean, AI can come even at the time of collection of data. So we're going through automation, we're going through standardization of a lot of processes that we used to do manually following SOPs. And I would say, as I mentioned before, these are big opportunities because this would mean reducing the timeline of getting a drug to the patients and saving
Mm-hmm.
more of their lives or more time for them to live a
Yeah.
healthy and lead a better life, right? But then with these opportunities, there are so many challenges that are posed in front of us right now. Be it understanding what data is being collected, because there's huge amount of data that's being collected right now.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
it genetic data, be it real world evidence data, be it a data that is collected by our smartwatches, which is like a very simple
Right.
thing that we don't really notice, but
Yeah.
that's a lot of data that's being generated, right? So there's a lot of complexity in the data collected. So after that, once you have this data, is all of this data useful? Do we know how to really streamline this data to understand what's actually happening? We do have statistical methods that we already know of, but then are we ready to analyze such a huge amount of data? Do we have the right tools? Do we have the right platform? Do we have the right even file management system to maintain this data, or to even analyze or maintain the reports? So in this way, I would feel it's a big, big challenge. Again, one of the challenges is how to manage the workforce, how to unlearn and then relearn uh, everything that we have done for so long. I am very new in the industry, but I do see there are so many SOPs. People have worked most of their years in the industry, overbuilding SOPs, overbuilding standard processes and pipelines. So, unlearning all of that and recreating all of that in a way that fits today's purpose is a big challenge. How would we get there is, I think, again, training, being flexible to adapt to the changes, understanding why do we need to adapt to these changes and how does this impact the industry, and of course our stakeholders. That's I think that's something that we really need to focus on.
The reason I really enjoy speaking to, let's say, programmers that have relatively fewer years of experience compared to someone who's been around for 30, 40 years is that you get very different perspective. Because if you've grown up, which I'm assuming you are, of course, grown up in the world of open source, of there's a new language coming up every single year. Rust is incredibly popular, but when you speak to any programmers who've in this space, such a subculture within programming itself, for obvious reasons, because you're such a regulated industry, you can't just sort of bring in the new, latest, shiny new thing, and it must be so hard to effectively to how do you effectuate that change. And one of the things that we're very passionate about is to trying to give a voice to everyone in the community to at least have that discussion. Besides, obviously the fuse events are fantastic. There's the pharma suck, but I think I think you've been also very vocal around this. And one of the things that you've called, which I think is an interesting way to put it, is the new normal.
Yeah.
Could you perhaps tell our listeners what do you how do you define the new normal?
I would define the new normal as anything. I mean, new way of living, right? So we've all come out of COVID. We've all learned new ways of living. We've all learned things that we probably had never thought of. And this is something similar. So again, for me, it's really interesting to always look at human nature, psychology, or even nature around us in general and learn from those instances, right? So this is one thing that I get out of that particular period of our lives, wherein there were changes, there were challenges, there were opportunities, because when COVID hit us, right, there was, I think everybody would agree, there was a boom in how we were preparing vaccines, we created vaccines, how we tackled with a pandemic. So there was opportunity, there were definitely challenges. Then we really made sure that we come out of it with flying colors, right? So similarly in the industry right now, there are a lot of changes happening. As I said, changes in the data, changes in the regulatory guidelines, changes in how are we submitting the data, how are we looking at the data, changes in how fast do we come up with a drug.
Mm.
So now with so many changes and challenges, we do have to, I mean, there is no way out of it, right? And I would say, and this is one of the very uh, good points that I had in my presentation last year as well, that, when we talk about revolutions that are brought up by us humans, right? So there are challenges, and then we find out ways to come out of these challenges. So I would say that this is a new normal for the industry. It is difficult, definitely, for different generations in the industry. There will be different solutions for different generation in the industry, and we are obviously still, we're in the process of finding out solutions for the same, and I think we're on the right way to find proper solutions out of these challenges and tackle with these challenges in a way that it becomes more efficient and impactful for what we are working on.
With regards to standards, the way someone put it, I think a programming director, is that this industry is very good at job creation, because the more standards come out, the more people you need. But it's important, obviously. How do you, within that framework of sort of things changing, how do you recommend, especially sort of newer programmers, to stay up to date with the ever evolving, um, CDISC standards, specifically?
Okay, so newer programmers, I would say, for me, it's very simple. So you have a technical skill, programming, how to use tools. You're probably good at the new tools and open source and all the new technologies because you probably have learned that in your education. So the challenging part for a person like me, who's very new in the industry, is actually learning about these standards and understanding these standards, understanding the data. I would say learning about CEDAR standards, even I have taken my own time. I'm still taking my time to learn about these standards, and I'm still usually going every time I'm working on something. I'm still going through all the IGs and all the guidance documents and whatnot. The simplest way is to just sit with the data, look at the data, map it to the guidance documents. I think CDISC has done an amazing job in collating all the reference documents at one place. And apart from just CDISC, there's so much happening right now, as you just mentioned, about Fuse, about Pharma, SUG, and about so many other conferences that are happening around the world. I mean, I have myself attended Fuse EU Connect twice, and I've learned so much in these two connects that I can't even put in. I mean, I can't put a number on that. So there's so much information out there. There's so many documents. There's so many videos. Fuse is making a huge effort in creating working groups, and not just Fuse. There are other organizations as well, right? So for me, how I dealt with it was I joined groups, working groups.
Yeah.
I made sure that I attended these conferences, or at least tried to talk to as many people as possible. I tried to join communities wherein we weren't just working on our regular study creation, or like development of deliverables, but also outside something your daily work, right? So, for example, I was an active part of Admiral till January or February this year, and I have learned so much over there. And it's not just about programming or a new programming language or even a platform like GitHub, but it's more about learning about standards, learning about collaboration. How do you talk to somebody who's probably sitting in a separate timeline as you, right, than you, right? So how do you manage your stakeholders? What are the expectations of a you just so the project that I am working on usually in my day-to-day work is different from what I worked on there. So just I would say depth is important. I mean, understanding depth of a particular project is important, but I would say we'd have to widen our knowledge for sure. We need to look at multiple resources. We need to talk to a lot of people. We need to network as much as possible. And we need to learn from each of these sources at the same time, which could be difficult and consuming. I understand that completely. But then widening our knowledge space is really important.
What's fascinating there that I think is really interesting, that I think a lot of programmers should pay heed to what you're saying, is that by participating in a lot of these working groups and the conferences, is to get an appreciation that this whole framework of standards and SOPs, that it's just a living organism. It just keeps changing, and being part of that conversation, I guess, gives one also the appreciation to understand why something is being done in a certain way, and sort of connect the dots.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's absolutely important to do that, because how else are you going to stay updated, right? Because I mean, you're working on a project. I understand you meet your colleagues, but then there are things happening outside your organizations. I mean, that you might not be aware of, right? So, this is a great way to be aware of what's happening, to be aware of what are the possibilities that you can achieve. In fact, I would say one thing that I really, really noticed the first time I went to Fuse was that there are different ways you can look at these conferences. When you visit one and when you attend one, you meet so many people. One is that you learn where are you currently in this whole scenario. Are you I mean, when you meet a lot of people, when you see a lot of processes happening, when you look at the market and you understand what's happening and how people are doing certain things, you understand at least 2 points. Am I doing things better than this? If yes, how do I build onto it? Okay, am I do or the second part could be, am I not there yet? Is it something that is better than my approach? I mean, this could be individually or at a team level, right? So there's learning both ways, right? So you tend to understand where you are positioned at and where do you need to move. If you're still, I mean, if you're doing better than what you have heard of, then how can you build on it? If you're not probably up to that mark, then what have they done to be at that position and how can you grow in the same process?
Mm.
Because again, and this could come off as a competition as such, but I look at it as a overall learning, a holistic learning, if you may. So which is important. I mean, I listen to a lot of professional development videos, so I was listening to this one video that I came across via LinkedIn itself. So it talked about how kids need holistic education and not just what we have in books. So similarly, how do we need holistic education, and we need to understand the whole picture rather than just staying at a particular point and moving up from there.
Education doesn't finish; it continues as an industry. Sort of zooming out a little bit, sort of more to the macro level. And by industry, I specifically refer to the clinical programming industry and biostats in general. How do you think the industry is tackling some of the ongoing challenges? Both, we spoke about the new technologies, evolving standards, the need for more and more programmers. It doesn't look like there's such a massive need for statistical programmers across the board. How do you think the industry is tackling these challenges? What's your take on that?
For the last 2 years, as much as I've observed, I think the industry is doing a great job because I see people being very adaptive to the new changes. And I'm not sure how it was before or how fast it grew, but at the moment, I see people being very adaptive of the whole open source world in general. And apart from that, as I mentioned, I mean, I know companies, I mean, I've been a part of Admiral myself, so I know that people are trying to collaborate, and it's not just within a company but outside a company. And that gives you a lot of mental space to grow, that increases innovation at least our level, right? So we are looking at the data, and more the merrier, right? So I mean, the more people that are involved in brainstorming, the better ideas you get. So I'd say in terms of collaboration, the industry is doing an amazing job
Yeah.
in terms of organizing these events like Fuse or Pharma SUG, or even any collaboration events or any meetups wherein we pick up a topic and we talk about
Yeah.
what's happening around that topic. So those things, I mean, knowledge sharing sessions, that's been amazing. If I open LinkedIn at any point of time, I have so much information that I can grab, right? So I think the industry is really well connected. Apart from that, training is one of the major things that I feel has been really great in the industry. We are actually investing our time and energy into training the workforce in the right way. And as you said, not just about the technical skills, but about the professional development skills, which is equally important now that we are dealing with all of these challenges. So, keywords that come to my mind are collaboration, training, adapting, being adaptive, and flexible. So, which are, I think, the key points of any growth that might happen in the industry in the coming days or years.
Tell us a little bit about your experience at Admiral. Sometimes it feels everyone is talking about Admiral, but what about the real life applicability? I think there was a submission, uh, I think 1 or 2 months ago, that was done with fully in R. I think it was GSK or
I think it was Novo.
Novo. Yes, yes, I think,
Yeah.
yeah, right, right, right. What's your take on the uptake of Admiral across the industry?
If you're hearing a lot about it, there's probably a chance there are positive impacts. So, no, but I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of Admiral, and not just because of the content or the reference that they're providing to the entire industry, but I mean, I would say 30% of my learning has come out of that project. And if you actually look at it, I mean, I have not been in this project for a very long time, but in this time, I have learned so much and in so many aspects of the industry, be it data, be it programming, be it platforms like
Mhm.
GitHub. I had no idea of GitHub. And it is only for this project that I actually learned GitHub, and I'm so thankful that I did, because
Yeah.
again, that's something that's coming up in the industry very actively. So I would say it's a brilliant project. There would be definitely, I mean, we are still building on it. There are still fixes happening, there's still updates happening. But the best part is that people are coming from different backgrounds, different industries, coming together, working on something that's going to be a standard across the industry, which is not very common, right? So that just screams innovation, motivation, collaboration, and just a huge, huge positive impact for me. I mean, so I feel, and the kind of network that has happened because of Admiral, it's unbelievable. I mean, today I can probably, I mean, a lot of my experiences are around these things, but when I went to Fuse, we were also talking about the world being really, I mean, it being a very small world, right? I mean, half the people I saw there were like, "Oh my God, I've seen her post on LinkedIn, and oh yeah, I know you from Admiral." So, so it is such a nice thing. It's such a happy thing when you just come across somebody who you have worked with, or look at their experiences, or listen to their experiences, and talk about all of these things at a bigger level than just your desk job, right? So that gives you, I mean, at least to me, it gives a lot of energy. It gives me the drive to work every day. uh, and yeah, I mean, it's just a really nice thing that is happening right now.
You mentioned you're no longer actively involved in Admiral, or
Yeah, so I worked on Admiral Ophthalmology. So that project is live. I mean, first version of the project is live now, and due to some time issues, I was working on a project, and because of that, I was a bit occupied. So for the time being, I've stepped out of the project. But yeah, I'm looking forward to work over there again. I cannot leave such a good chance to work with Admiral again.
I hope you've definitely inspired some others to also join, because
I hope so.
what's amazing is that community feeling, as you say, where you work on a project for an extended period of time. You push stuff to different repos, and then seeing it used, and then even better, seeing your code being presented at Fuse, and then meeting the people in real life is definitely rewarding. Where do you see R in the next coming years? If you can make any prediction, how do you see R?
Oh, I see R everywhere. So, no, but I would say not just R. Currently, R is the major player in the industry, SaaS and R, I would say. But it's not just R. I mean, that's just my feeling, right? So, in fact, I was talking to a lot of people at Fuse last year, and we had a lot of SCE presented there. So, every person that I was speaking with, we ended up talking about how it's not just R or SAS or Python that's going to stay. So it's not like our SCEs are going to be revolving around R or SAS. So it's not just R, it's going to be a lot of programming languages that will be coming to the industry in the future. Why? Because I'll tell you, this is something that I learned during my master's. So we used to work on a lot of genetic data, and otherwise statistical data as well, just for understanding the whole concept, the statistical analysis, and also the genomics part of the course. Now, we would usually use Python for any sequence based data like genomics data, and we would usually use R for any tabular data. Now, Python also has a package called pandas, which deals with tables. So Python now also has a functionality that can deal with tabular data. But at least in the beginning, we were using these two different languages for different kind of data sets. I feel that's one of the reasons why we will see not just R, but a lot of programming languages in the future, because with different kind of data, again, our mentality should not be just to stick to one language that's popular or that's giving us good results right now, but to look for ways that are working the best for the kind of data that we're working on. So if you have a data that goes well with Python, and Python is working for you, and it gives you the results that you want, and it gives you the visualization of data that you want, then you go for it. If R is that language that's working for you, or SAS for that matter, then you go for that. So I would say shouldn't be just one language. It should be what's working best for the data, and what's working best for what are you presenting to the regulatory authorities.
The world is almost built on Python these days, so
Yeah.
it can work for this part of the industry as well.
Yeah.
One final question, bit off topic, but still keen to hear your views on this, especially as someone who's sort of come from bioinformatics and has sort of seen different parts of the industry, and now you're at a big sponsor. How do you think a programmer, especially in their early career, should think about both sponsor versus CRO, small biotech versus large sponsor, small CRO versus big CRO?
Again, I don't have a lot of knowledge on the other part of the world, which is the CRO. So, fortunately, I mean, I started my career with Novartis, and I have seen this part of the world. But I have worked with a lot of people who are working at CROs right now, and I would say the knowledge they have is amazing. The kind of understanding they have of the data and of the submissions and of the processes is absolutely amazing. So I feel that, I mean, I feel doesn't matter where you start. There could be a few things over here and there. I mean, people who have experiences in both these areas would know better. But I would say there should be nothing that stops you from joining a CRO or a sponsor. But I would say, yeah, there could be differences in terms of learnings. As in sponsor, probably it gives you a wide range of opportunities in terms of going to a particular, I mean, going to a section of the whole process that you want to work on. Whereas in CROs, you might not get to see that. Again, I might be talking with less knowledge or even half knowledge over here. But I would say, with respect to, I mean, personally, I would say that if I have to gain more knowledge over the years and grow more, there is, I mean, I think CROs offer a wide range of opportunities in doing that. You get to work on multiple projects, you get to work with multiple people, you learn not just technical part of your jobs, but also learn about dealing with different kind of teams, different kind of projects, different kind of therapeutic activities. So you're not limited to one particular therapeutic activity. While at a sponsor company, you would probably grow in one particular I mean, again, I know there are ways to switch your area of work over there as well, but in a sponsor company you might be able to grow in a different way. So I would say there could be, this is a very person to person kind of an experience. So depends on what a person is willing to achieve in their life, or what goals do they have, what plans do they have for their development, right? So that is something entirely personal to people. But yeah, for me, I think a mix of both is absolutely amazing if you get that chance.
We've discussed a lot of very interesting things. I think what stuck out for me in particular is this idea that I would definitely encourage and pass on of participating as much as possible in the community, the ability to the opportunities to work with different working groups from CDISC to other conferences as well. You've been very active in Admiral in open source. I think for your, I guess, relatively short time in the industry, I think I think you've been very active, especially attending two Fuse conferences, which is an amazing way to, I guess, feel the energy of and the passion that people have for this work, which is obviously a bit hard to do if you're working remotely. I think that's something
Definitely.
that everyone, all the listeners, should definitely pay heed to. Are there any final remarks?
There are challenges that are coming at us with a very fast pace. uh, we are smart enough to answer, I mean, find answers or find solutions for these challenges. But the best way to do anything about these challenges is to come together as a community, work together, and find solutions. So I highly, I mean, I'm a pro for community level of working, way of working, and of course that's what open source is all about, right? So that's the buzzword these days. So yeah, I would just say that learning is, first of all, continuous learning, and continuous learning in a community is the best thing that we can do in order to be present in the new era of working.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we're actually going to be in India, and we're doing an event in Hyderabad on the 9th of May. We're also going to be in Bangalore on the 7th of May, but we'll definitely see you and the rest of the community in Hyderabad on the 9th of May, which I invite everyone on to, and we'll definitely post the links on the different channels. With that, I want to thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I hope it's helpful for our listeners. And if anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Oh, I'm always available on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Excellent.